Buddy, I'm going to do a share screen. Hope this works. Maddie, give me a shout out. You can see that? Okay.
Yep. That's good.
Yeah, so some people, so I've been a member of the Union Co-op Council now for a number of years, and when Maddie and John saying how exciting to see 50 people on this call, it's we're growing with the thought of Zoom, making it easier for us to show up together, growing in capacity, but also we have to grow in our understanding and our shared approaches. So just playing with my screen so I can see people. Sorry about that. Again, I would say, let's in the olden days, we would really give an applause to the folks who've been organizing on the ground. I think it's so exciting for that. So this is a presentation that helps frame. I hope to talk for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have that long or more to talk about it. And some of this may be redundant, but hopefully it supports our shared understanding, and that's the general idea. I say the cooperative ecosystem and how unions build power is what we want to look at together today. For people who don't know, I'm at the City University of New York, where I've been able to form something called the Community and Worker Ownership Project. I'm a union carpenter by trade. That was my first career, but the truth is, it was a collective associated with the food co-op industry that turned me into a carpenter when I was 22. And I think that's an important thing to note is it was the Northeast Federation of Food Co-ops, and they were expanding their warehouse. And they put in the contract that whoever got the job for that construction had to hire or train, then they said a woman or minority. And that's how I first became a carpenter, was with a very, very small firm who would have been probably 4 or 5 white guys doing the job. And they included me, and this is upstate New York. And soon after that, I reached out to the union to join the apprenticeship program. And no woman had walked through their door, so their jaws dropped. They didn't know how to say no. So I then became a union apprentice in 1982. Having trouble advancing the slides. Oh, let me go back. So COVID happened. As a matter of fact, we're at an anniversary this week of 2 years, strange as that is. And I heard this expression then when things were going so crazy, which is a quote by Lenin: there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. And we've been facing those kind of weeks these past 2 years, and how much we're sitting still, but how much is moving rapidly. And that's somewhat evident with 50 people on this call wanting to talk about unions and co-ops. But the other thing that happened at that time was I got invited by the mayor's office to be part of a task force for labor and workforce development in coping with COVID. And in those meetings, the word co-op or cooperative solutions came up, and a number of us, about 18 union leaders signed on to a letter saying we should start a working group. And we started something called Cooperative Solutions Working Group. This is who started to participate in it. And a few of them are on this call now. I think I saw some people from local 1500 UFCW already on the call here who were in many of these meetings. And this tells you we had about a quarter of people from unions, that many from co-ops, and the other half coming from education, nonprofits, other businesses. And these meetings went once a month for a year. And it gave us an opportunity to really think together about co-ops, but it also gave us the opportunity to learn together. And as a result, along with Bernadette King Fitzsimmons, who's on this call, we put together the Union Toolkit for Cooperative Solutions. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit as I continue to frame this for us. But I wanted to pause and do a check-in on this piece of information, which Maddie mentioned briefly. In the cooperative world, there are 7 principles for how cooperatives work. It has to do with democratic engagement, but the most important thing I want to differentiate is it's a question of who owns and who controls, who gets to decide. So we're mostly in this grouping, we talk about worker co-ops, where the workers get to decide. And 2 examples are Cooperative Homecare Associates. Hello, Denise, shout out to our rep from there. And Arizmendi Bakeries on the West Coast, examples of workers who decide how the company runs. Consumer co-ops, an example would be REI or food co-ops in New York in Brooklyn, we have the Park Slope Food Co-op, which is very large and people know about it. But it's the consumers who decide. That's who gets elected to the board of directors. It's one member, one vote in all of these. But who is the member? So a purchasing cooperative might be a lot of small hardware stores that belong to their co-op, or an agricultural co-op like Ocean Spray Cranberry or Land O'Lakes. And then there's credit unions, another model, housing co-ops, another. And multi-stakeholder is something we should really be exploring hard, because imagine if REI organizes well and those workers have control as workers, maybe not an equal vote to the consumer. And one could see how it could be a conflict. If the consumer wants the lowest price, they may not care about the wages of the workers. And so how do you really sort of manage that? So important thing to understand is, what's the class of membership for the cooperative we're talking about? And when we do it in the Union Co-op Council, we're talking about worker co-ops, but multi-stakeholder co-ops would give us an opportunity to really broaden that conversation. So remember, it's always about membership control. So now let me talk about the toolkit that we put together. And this really was a combination of a number of us also on this call and in the space of unions and co-ops. What do we understand? And we collected case studies and we identified these 7 different common threads of what made a union and a co-op collaborate, or a union starting the co-op, or a co-op, the workers joining a union, or the power of the union. So openness to innovative organizing, help with contract negotiations, professional expertise like organizers, lawyers, access to bankers, looking for access to capital, sectoral analysis. I can't tell you enough how important that is when you want to change a policy in a sector. Having the voice of the union, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Use of union spaces. Having worked for the Union's Training Fund, I know how great it was when we were able to offer that space to other people to do training, and of course, training funds. So this is the 7 tools, and we will put in the chat the toolkit and send it on the listserv so you can read the paper. But there's a number of ways to think about this, and I want to introduce that. This is a very broad comment, and I want to shout out right now to Movement Generation, and this may be a confusing slide, but let me introduce that the Movement for Climate Justice and an organization called Movement Generation has introduced this concept that talks about the extractive economy to the regenerative economy. And we often have a lot to fight in the extractive economy in terms of how capitalism, consumerism, exploitation. But in the new economy, we want cooperation and we want ecological well-being. And how do we do that? Part of it is building the systems that will exist in the regenerative economy while we work to take down the old. This is a very important framework for us to understand, because in the cooperative movement, we're really often building the new systems. And in the long honored union movement, it's been fighting the man, if you don't mind me saying, fighting the system that is so exploitative. So we really want to look at a way that we build new together. So I talk about that a cooperative ecosystem needs 4 things to be effective. And I refer to it as the globe, the heart, and the hands. It's 4 aspects that are needed for strong business, strong enterprise, industry, and sectors to thrive. And this is important to understand, because we're not just another business when we want to be part of a co-op. And when we're active in unions, we want to make sure that the businesses we build are strong, worker-centered, community-centered, all things towards a sustainable economy. So I refer to this as paying attention to the political economy, the people skills, the business acumen, and the industry skills. So let me say the globe, the political economy. Unions help with legislative heft. Lobbyists, lawyers, organizers who can be brought on to strategize across the market sector or region. And I ask the question, can a single co-op do that? And I'll give an example here. Cooperative Homecare Associates was alive and functioning from 12 people to probably several hundred about 15 years ago, when they decided to organize with 1199. And a big reason to organize with SEIU was to get help with that legislative help and to make a shift in how the money was being moved. Our tax dollars were being moved to healthcare. Was the prices for wages were so low, they needed a bigger voice. So this is an example of partnering with a union to raise the market or to raise the floor. The heart is how we manage ourselves and each other. And unions serve as a check and balance for worker voice with concerns for workplace standards, wages, and benefits. And unions bring a collective bargaining agreement, and it can be used for new co-ops so that the terms for managing grievances, democratic processes are vetted and embedded early on. This is really important to understand. Something that is so well grounded in the union movement is that negotiation and a collective bargaining agreement can be ported into a company that really wants to do well. It doesn't always have to be with a hammer. It can be really like, oh, this is how we do it. It's a tool that we can use to build the governance structure of a co-op. The right hand is the financial management. And I bring out that unions have access to finances. They hold huge sums of funds for a lot of reasons. So some of the best financial managers I know come out of the union movement. And I was so happy to learn this. I want to thank you, Josh Kellerman from our WDSU, who pointed it out to me recently, that when unions prepare to negotiate contracts, they examine the books. They look under the cover and they look at the finances of the business. That financial acumen is so important. And it's something that the co-op movement really needs. It's something that the left really needs. We need financial acumen. We can't assume that the only people who understand finances come out of the business schools for capitalist endeavors. We can use that acumen for collective endeavors. And the last part that I really love so much being a carpenter and having taught in the apprenticeship program is that unions help build the skills. And I saw this when we were doing workforce development training and that wonderful partnership that we were able to have with unions to bring people into the building trades. That workforce training can bring lots of opportunities and advancement for workers and helps them move from company to company as well. So an example I'll use again with Cooperative Homecare Associates is even though the primary job they have people do is home care work, because they're members of 1199, they get access to 1199's training fund and the job titles that they can be prepared for. And we've seen people who were home care workers become registered nurses and phlebotomists and radiologists, other jobs that may pay better and be different in the healthcare sector. So really looking, how do we go across a sector? Unions help with that in a very loud voice and with lots of resources. So as I say, unions help shape industry standards. They raise the floor across the market. They fight for workers across the supply chain. And let me say, shout out to my friend Gary Bonadonna from Workers Unite. They organized a shop called Spot Coffee, and it was a few different shops, and they organized Gimme Coffee in Ithaca, and they had these smaller shops. But as they kept going, now they're organizing Starbucks. And as of this morning, I heard 76 Starbucks have filed, workers in Starbucks in 76 shops have filed. And I've heard that, I think 5 or 6 of them in my own city. So I'm really excited about that. And it really goes to show how there is a tipping point when you have access across a market, across geographies, and you can raise the floor. So I'll briefly mention these case studies because they're all mentioned in the toolkit, and I'll ask Maddie or someone else to put this in the chat, the toolkit, and a recent story that we got published in Nonprofit Quarterly that talks about this a little bit, and also one in Labor Notes that was just published about the Lobster 207. I'll make sure they're all in, we can share them. So you can read the case studies in more length when you have time. But here's an example of Lobster 207 in Maine with the machinists that got organized under conditions of where the regulation required that it was really an every man for himself market. Every or woman, every lobster person had to have their own boat and their own business in order to legally work with the regulations. And so a lobsterman's having dinner with his brother who works, who's a machinist and works at Bath Iron Works, and complaining, and the union brother says, you guys need a union, and reached out to his union at the machinists, the IAM District 4. And District 4 took a real interest and actually brought people in and down to their training center in Maryland. This is an example of what a good training center looks like with our union dollars. And over several visits, each one being for days at a time, did training, did policy research, regulation, understanding what was needed, and was able to put all these tools to work to come up and form an affiliate local to the machinists called Lobster 207 or Local 207. 207's the area code for Maine. And they were able to put together this affiliate, this co-op, and eventually purchase a production facility, and are now putting people to work in that co-op. We have SEIU from the West Coast, and I know we have Ray here, and Ray wrote the story in the toolkit about LVN, Allied Up, and Futuro Health, and that's really looking at significant changes in the healthcare industry, where businesses, hospitals are changing who they hire and how, and it pushed people outside of the hospital who used to work in the hospital. And so coming to a market solution by forming a co-op to organize those workers and then tying it to workforce development with Futuro Health and coming up with some strategies to form new companies that everyone could work for outside of the hospital walls, but in the healthcare industry, is the new model that's being forged. And SEIU is dedicating researchers and policy folks to this strategy. People's Choice Communication is in New York City, and it was formed by striking workers. And I want to really shout out to that. And I don't know if Troy's on this call or Eric, two people working with People's Choice, but all this time, it's the longest running strike of workers, and Spectrum has been union busting and putting people to work outside of the union walls. Some people came to, members of Local 3 said, we have to start our own company, and they're starting their own company to build out the internet provider system. And it's cooperatively owned and run. And the vision there is that it will be cooperatively, it'll be multi-stakeholder. So consumers who use will have a voice in how the company is run, as well as the workers. And I couldn't say more wonderful things than this about Cooperative Homecare Associates, in which I've spoken about before, excuse me, but it was formed, I think, in 1985. So it really has legs. It's in the South Bronx. Very, very poor congressional district in our country, came up with this wonderful slogan in the past few years: committed to delivering quality care by creating quality jobs. And there's been a dedication to that throughout. They partnered with PHI a number of years ago to do research and training, and unionized with 1199 to get access to the policy. It's a great story for expanding what is often considered not great jobs. I'll mention now, some of us know Steve Dawson, who worked with them in the early days, and he wrote a wonderful article a few years ago in the Pinkerton papers. It's a short article. I'll look for it and put it on our listserv one day, but it's called Making Bad Jobs Better. And he really looks at this strategy of when a market just can't pay people well, home health care. That's unfortunate. That's a bigger problem in our society. But he looked at that and said there are lots of other qualities we can do to make that job better. And Cooperative Home Care has been on the front lines with that. This is a very exciting story about New Era Windows. And New Era Windows is out of Chicago, and it's got a story where the company was going to close down and the workers said no, and they started to take it over. It's actually a lengthy story, and it's wonderfully told in this report. Again, I want to thank Bernadette King Fitzsimmons, who's helped write all of this. But here it's really a story of takeover. And I think it's an important thing for us to really pay attention to, that, you know, whose economy? Our economy. And here you have the workers taking over the factory. Not an easy fight at all. There were probably 2 or 3 different rounds of attempts of buy-in and buy-out and takeover and occupation. It goes back to the days of when I think Obama, when he first was running for president, visited the factory and supported the worker buyout. It needed the union to help, and the working world stepped in, which is a loan fund that we love and are so strong in supporting workers to purchase and buy and control the economy of their industry. So the story of New Era Windows is great. I think the Union Co-op Council hosted Armando at one or two of our conferences when he came and spoke. Homeland Grocery is a great story because it uses the model of employee ownership that other people can say much more about in terms of ESOP buyout and what does it mean to actually buy a company. There's several hundred workers. There are a number of stores around the Southwest, but it's unique in that it's 100% employee owned. It's not outside investors say you get some share, we'll get most of the shares. This is really 100% employee owned. And the UFCW Local 1000 was behind this conversion. And it's a very exciting story to look at food distribution in an economy where the workers can feel really proud of what they're part of. This case study is not in the toolkit, but Casey Amadon, I'm going to get his full name wrong. I'm so sorry. I hope he's on the call though, and he can correct me. It was a union organizer for IUE CWA, and they learned that Snow River was going out of business because they lost their contract with Walmart, and they had 3 or 4 shops that were producing wood products around in the Midwest. And one of the shops said to their union organizer, Casey, we really don't need to rely on Walmart. There's a market there. And the company was willing to just let the whole company go, and the union helped the workers buy it. And so this was really something that we've been seeing, is that union reps who listen to the workers, therefore have eyes and ears on what's really possible and say, wait, this company is not going out of business. We're going to take it into business. And so it's a new and growing unionized co-op. And it's in the Midwest. I'm going to forget where, so Casey can come on later and share. And then I want to talk about these 2 examples, but there are really more. So Co-op Cincy and Co-op Dayton take the strategy of we have to look at the local economy. We have to do a whole thing together. Unions are involved, developers, social justice movements, and saying what businesses can we step into and what solutions can we solve that will have workers-centered, community-centered, and we have a lot of stories here. Co-op Cincy has a grocery store, Co-op Dayton has a grocery store, Co-op Cincy has a number of businesses. And it's a wonderful way to think about this, and I love the coverage in this toolkit, but I'll tell you, you can look in their websites and see so much exciting growth. We have a lot to thank for them for bringing together all these stakeholders. And I want to shout out to Lucy, LA Union Co-op Initiative, and Downtown Crenshaw, and really looking similarly at how do we look at an economy locally. This is not in the toolkit. It's an example of where we can go. I would add to this a story, the Bronx Co-op Development Initiative, Brooklyn Communities Collaborative. Those are 2 here in New York that I'm looking at, really looking at how do we look at our economy and where do we look at opportunity where workers, and in our case, I would say with the help of the unions, step in and take more control of the economy. And so again, this is an example of how these tools got used. There's no end to the possibility of combinations. The most important tool, and I almost want to say it's a requirement for the others, is the image here is the toolbox. You put all your tools in it, but that toolbox must be a willingness to innovate. And that willingness to innovate is represented, I think, by everybody who's on this call, which really says we care about change. What do we need? We have to be open-minded to what that change will look like, and then start putting these tools to work. So I want to end with this quote by Arthur Chiliotis, who's a retired president of CWA Local 1180 and has been a union leader in New York City for a long time. And he did attend many of the working group meetings that we held. And he offered this quote for the toolkit. He said, it doesn't matter what work you do. You're entitled to live a decent life. And that is the cooperative movement. That is the labor movement. That is social justice. We are in our separate lanes, but I think we all need to understand that the goal is the same for all of us. And to the extent we can work together, we should. And I think that might be the end of my slides. So I will stop sharing. And sort of my desire now is that we take the next 20, 25 minutes to talk. I'll look at the chat if there's anything I have to see, but I see so many wonderful faces here. And I want to really just invite the conversation, but I did ask Gary Bonadonna, and I do like Starbucks coffee, and maybe I won't have to be guilty anymore, but one day, may we dream and own this supply chain. You know, fair trade is a conversation all over the globe, and we're always trying to say, is it really fair trade, or is it just what would be, you know, greenwashing, whitewashing, whatever you want to call it? Is it really fair? And I think we have to look at all the ways workers and our land are not exploited, but fully held for the supply chain of anything we need. So here we are, maybe all, you know, drink coffee fully fair and beautiful. And I want to start with asking Gary to give any reflections on what we've been talking about and open up the conversation. Do you mind, Gary, getting put on the spot?
No, Rebecca. Just like comments on the Starbucks campaign, or?
Well, everything I just said. I mean, I wrote an article that just got published in Nonprofit Quarterly, and I allowed myself a paragraph in that article to dream. And that dream was, if we could have a union co-op coffee shop, which by the way, there is one in Rhode Island that I don't know if anybody's here from, Cups or White Electric Coffee, one little co-op that's also unionized with an independent union, by the way. But if we could scale that and take over the ownership of Starbucks, what would that look like? You know, but I think it starts with organizing wherever we are. And I want to shout out to that and your effort to organize Starbucks for worker power right here, right now.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, you know, I know I'm smiling because, yeah, owning Starbucks is obviously, you know, such a tremendous goal. But I guess, you know, I will say anything's possible because when workers in Buffalo won their union elections at Starbucks, as we've been seeing now across the country, it's inspired so many baristas in that company, and, you know, showed people that you can take on a company like this and it's possible to win. So, but yeah, Rebecca, I get, you know, to your point, you know, even at a, you know, much smaller company, right? I mean, there could have been a nice example of a union co-op in Ithaca, New York. We organize and represent Gimme Coffee, and I don't know how many people were familiar with your article, which I thought was fantastic, but I think framed the issue the right way. It showed where if a co-op gets involved, where it can go wrong, because we could have had a good you know, a good example, good working relationship there, and that example, you know, pretty unprincipled ploy by the company to use a worker co-op as you know, a substitute or alternative to a union. So I'm not sure. Yeah,
That's probably a nexus for us to explore, that it's not either or. When someone wants to turn the company into a cooperatively owned and run, it need not be, therefore we don't need a union. Sometimes I think many of us have heard, well, if you're a co-op, why do you need a union? If you genuinely have good democratic engagement, why do you need a union? And I think, you know, what I was trying to say, both in that article, but in this this presentation, is there's all these things the union does that an individual company can't do, including, if it's a small company, if there's a conflict, there's a grievance procedure that is vetted with a third party called your union representative. But also stepping in to think about how, if the company wants to sell, if the owner wants to sell the company and it's a unionized shop, the role that the union can play, which would have been a different way to play out the story in Ithaca that you brought up. Because just tell me for a minute, Gary, and then I'll open it up to a few others I definitely want to hear, and I'll pick on a few of you also for things that you've said in the chat. But Gary, if the co-op developer had come to you, to you as the representative agent of the union, say, the owner of Gimme Coffee wants to sell. What can we do? You know, and I think this is the question for let's imagine what the union will do.
Yeah, not knowing this world too much, and I've learned a lot. And to be honest, a bad experience there brought me to befriend many of you here, actually. So see a little bit maybe of a silver lining. Horrible example, but really got to know beautiful people in this space. So I did want to just say that. But yeah, we would have jumped right in. I mean, you know, strong union leaders. And if that was something they were interested in owning, you know, and buying the company from the owner, union, you know, we would have helped with all that. I mean, I learned a bit along the way of, you know, how you create the bylaws and what the structure looks like and everything. And I understood, you know, you still have the unions, the collective bargaining agreement with, you know, some additional things of what the ownership structure looks like. I still, to this day, you know, hope an opportunity arises where we can do a successful union co-op. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah. You know, I think the story of New Era Windows is wonderful for this, because the union saw that basically the owner was pulling the hell out. They were pulling everything out of the company and saying, giving it to their shell company somewhere else and saying there's nothing here. And the workers who are union members and active said, wait a minute, no, there's something here. But they needed the financing and the acumen and, you know, to get behind purchasing what was left and then taking it over. Mm-hmm. And for many of us who've worked in the field, in a job, whatever that 35, 40 or more hours looks like, you need help. You need somebody who's going to think about what's the research, what's the advocacy, what's the policy here, what's the financing here. Mm-hmm. Shout out to the financing. So I want to open it up, but let me tell you a few of you who I'd love to hear from. I really want to honor RW, Josh, and let you just open up maybe a question or an idea of responsible, really, RWDSU 338, responsible for working on the organizing strategy for REI. Consumer co-op, not a worker co-op, but we want to really just identify a little bit of, you know, what you hear here that either is a question or an invitation. And I'm also going to ask someone from Co-op Cincy to speak. I saw someone put in the chat about our harvest, and I'd love to hear about that. Anything, Josh?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. Nice to see everybody, and thanks for all the good information, Rebecca. Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that, you know, this isn't new news to most people on this call, but it's very difficult to organize under the NLRA. Right? It's set up to prevent organizing, not support it. And so one strategy that our union, as well as some others, have employed is, well, let's think about workers that are already kind of predisposed to solidarity and orient some of our organizing there, right? So, and worker cooperatives, consumer cooperatives, and frankly, any sort of cooperative, you know, workers often take those jobs in part because they believe some sort of movement, some sort of solidarity more broadly. And so it's just an easier conversation, right? And so you can sometimes take a step, you know, a much easier step towards organizing and focusing on those. And so big picture, you know, we've sort of become the union of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, with, you know, based on that. So we have, like, you know, adult toy stores throughout New York. You know, we have cannabis in New York, and we have guitar centers around the country, not all of them, but some. And so that's all part of that theory. And I think that cooperatives is sort of a new area that we've been looking into. We already have some producer co-ops, and I'm sure, you know, that the USFWC has many of them as well, because we organize, like we have a Welch's, for example, which is Welch's is a producer co-op of grape growers. And so we have some of that. We've been orienting recently towards the consumer co-op. We had a sort of unsuccessful run at the Brooklyn Food Co-op. You know, they're complicated spaces where a lot of people don't see, you know, the value of unions. But again, like in the context of the NLRA, it is sort of easier target than like a random place where no one cares about anyone and no one took the job because they care about anything. It's just a job, right? It's sort of hard, presents a bigger challenge. So anyways, the REI fight, you know, again, like it really came to us where the workers were ready. I mean, you know, you probably know we've got almost all of our organizing team in Alabama right now at the Amazon facility. So this was really done with just a shoestring, you know, pretty much one organizer, but the REI folks were ready to roll, and the internal committees were ready to roll. They had already sort of self-organized, and you know, that's like a, you know, that's a dream for a union. So we're really happy to be in this space. And, you know, if there are any ideas about, you know, how we can be allies to worker co-ops, you know, we're open to that, as well as, you know, Rebecca talked about. We have a lot of ability to organize and move legislative agendas and all sorts of other things. So we'd love to partner with organizations, whether or not they're planning to organize. So anyways, that's my spiel, but thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Josh. I didn't realize that you were the Union of Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, but I had noticed the things you have started to organize. And so I'm like, all right, got it. That's like reinventing, but I loved your expression of we're pre-exposed to solidarity. And I think that is really a big future for us as we build the movement for worker and land justice. Let me expand that, because, you know, all wealth comes from labor and land. Just want it like this fundamental thing, labor and land. So how do we not exploit it? We're facing climate change, like we are, so it's so evident. We have to think differently about what we have and how we do it. And so we all are predisposed to solidarity. And that may be like a really great common denominator to say, how do we get in this together? Thinking of owning the company that is doing the work shifts a little bit of, you know, again, which tools are in our toolbox that is getting out to work, right? Financing buyouts is a very interesting way to think differently about the economy, and hopefully different than buying out and selling out, right? But buy it out and take it over and really practice deep democracy, which is what we teach a lot at the School of Labor and Urban Studies, where I teach cooperative management, is really how do you practice democracy hard? Like, how does that undo oppression in the current moment? And I know that a lot of my union siblings are doing that, like practicing democracy hard, making sure people are heard. And when they're heard, that the change that they need, the change that they see comes forward. I grew up in a labor movement where I knew how important the health and safety was in my work site because the union was teaching it. And as a woman in the 1980s in the building trades, I was like, you guys have a lot to learn, man, because this is not feeling good to me. And over time, I saw how the union was coming around and making it absolute, responding to what was apparent and saying, we want to be part of the change. Let me see if someone from Our Harvest, someone put in the chat about Our Harvest being a multi-stakeholder. Anybody want to speak about that before I just pick on other people? I see a few people, and sometimes if you come on camera, you get picked on. More Harvest?
Kristen from Co-ops Harvest. Hey, but I didn't put that in the chat, so I'm not sure who else is here that maybe wants to speak on it. So I'm not sure it was in the chat, but yes, Our Harvest is a union co-op. That's a multi-stakeholder, started as a worker co-op, 5 years in, became a worker and community owned co-op. And it celebrates its 10-year anniversary in April. We're very excited because it's kind of a miraculous co-op. We made many, many mistakes. It was the first one we did, and it's just lovely that it hasn't died. We're thrilled. So I don't know what you wanted to say though about it, but having United Food and Commercial Workers as the labor union has been extraordinarily helpful from the get-go, helping us launch and then supporting us through and creating all sorts of opportunities. One of our workers who's been there for 9.5 years, his son is going, to college next year, and they're looking at what's available through the unions. There's extraordinarily online availability for him that he's really, really interested in. So yeah, there's all kinds of awesome opportunities.
Yeah, when I was putting together the slides that talk about can a single co-op business do that? Question mark. There was a series of those slides. I know that these small, and I started a co-op, a home improvement company with some colleagues and friends and comrades. We put together this home improvement company, and we had trouble, and it was not unionized because that would be a big leap. And in this very small company, we had so much trouble getting the people trained, getting trained workers. When they were trained pretty well, they were getting a better job somewhere else. And the union has this robust ability to do training and education. And so attaching there is such a wonderful way to sort of stretch our potential. I wonder who else would, I see some faces. Margaret Bow, it's been a while, and I appreciated learning from you back when. So I wonder if, what the USDA has to do with all this is such a hidden secret.
Well, thanks, Rebecca. The USDA has been very involved with cooperative development and knowledge about cooperatives, statistics about cooperatives, research into cooperatives. It has been focused very much on agricultural cooperatives, producer co-ops, but and very focused obviously on rural, but as rural communities change and evolve, USDA is getting involved in supporting other types of cooperatives as well, and worker co-ops obviously are quite important. And I'm really here, I'm a part of Cooperation Works, which is a network of co-op developers. And we were brainstorming earlier this week about what topics we wanted to do for our training series for the co-op developers. And the number one topic was unions and co-ops. We need to better understand this. So I want to talk with you offline, Rebecca, because the presentation that you just shared, I would love to have co-op developers really dig into this as well. So thank you.
We would love that. Union Co-op Council really wants to talk more with co-op developers, but also with unions, because it's the hidden, well, maybe not so hidden anymore, but it's our secret sauce. This could be our secret sauce. Mike, I'm not sure, Mike Friedman, did I see a hand go up? And
yeah, if this is appropriate. I mean, I just a couple of different thoughts, but a general thought I have is I think that the tenor of this discussion is sort of getting people who are committed to co-ops and working in the co-op world to sort of see how unions can be a real help in that work and offer the kind of things you offered. Your slide deck was sort of focused on these are the benefits that unions can bring. Having had a lot of experience, a long time experience, I'm a retired Teamster. I was a founding member of Teamsters for Democratic Union, and I've worked in the Electrical Workers Union at Westinghouse plant for a number of years. I think there's also an effort to train and educate unions about the advantages co-ops bring to unions. Too many unions, someone talked about the labor law system and it's how hard it is to win. Well, but the point is it assumes that there's this ultimate inherent antagonism between labor and management. And therefore, the answer to that is a collective bargaining agreement and a worker's right to elect the union to represent them. But so unions have come to sort of be kind of a little bit bureaucratic. Many of them, some of them here are breaking away from that. But the idea that unions, if they understood there's more than just negotiating a contract, more than just health and benefits, that there are ways of retaining jobs, there are ways of building worker input, there are ways of having democracy that would help the union grow its base and increase its resources. It's not just a one-way street. And there are some unions that are opening up to that. But I'm my experience as a co-op incubator, because I worked for Center for Community-Based Enterprise for a number of years. We've had a couple of opportunities to work with unions, and you really have to understand the union you're working with. Well, in two situations, very similar, we had a very good thing going in Florida and a very good thing with the UFCW here in Detroit about so. But the person in that union who was really enthusiastic got promoted to Washington or promoted to another union, and whoever took their place had no interest in it at all. They wanted to do is collective bargaining, and sort of that ended that work, unfortunately. So I think there is a way of getting labor representatives, business agents who are on the shop floor to see when is the company going to close? When is it possible to sort of say, we want to write a first refusal? When is it possible to see, here's an opportunity for the union to sort of move into an area that maybe it hasn't been in before, like New Era. The UE was very open to that. Many unions wouldn't have been. So I think it's a two-way street about education and what each sector brings to the other, not just what can unions do for co-ops. I'm done.
I appreciate that, Mike, and I'm so happy to see Josh's head nodding up and down, and some of my other, it's the other side of the equation, and maybe that would be like our next thing to shape is really, how do we look at owning companies? How do unions look at owning companies? Like that's, sorry, but I was trained way back when. I guess I had to take a class reading Karl Marx, and there was something there, if you recognize the name, there was something there about owning the means of production. And we sold that whole idea out thanks to a number of things when capitalism rose in our parents' lifetime, probably, looking at the National Labor Relations Act, you get a seat at the table. You got a seat at the table. Now shut up and manage your seat, rather than really owning the means of production. And how do we do that? I think it's really, really going to be important for us. And I argue it's the union movement that's going to help us do that. Lots of hands up and hearts so good. Let's do that. And fight like hell with the rules that we got, right? So it's both those things. And I think I used the Audre Lorde quote in the article in Nonprofit Quarterly. And I'm not going to quote it perfectly now, but you can't tear down the house with the tools that built it. Maybe, but you need to use them also. And that's really looking at that movement generation meme that says there's the extractive economy and there's the regenerative economy. And what do we use to tear down and what do we use to build up? And those muscles that we need to build come out of really that solidarity approach. I want to go ahead, Maddie.
I wanted to just chime in and lift up that there is some of that work of outreach to unions about worker co-ops through the work of the local labor outreach task force in the Union Co-ops Council. I don't know if that was what you were about to jump into, Rebecca, but
no,
there's that group is working a lot on reaching out to local labor federations to really do that kind of education so that it is not just sort of who happens to hear about it, but it's more of a systematized educational approach that gets more tied into these labor institutions. I don't know if Liz is available to talk any more on that, or if you want to go into any of that, Rebecca.
Liz came on camera, great.
Yeah, I'm here. Yes, and we had a meeting yesterday, and we're planning to do outreach specifically through the labor councils. We've done Los Angeles, County Federation of Labor with 350 unions. We've done presentations and signed people up for, workshops, which we're starting to produce now. So we'd very much like to have people join us in that effort because, we have to make a concerted effort. We have to have an organizing plan rather than just, passively waiting for the unions to come to us to become educated. We need to have an organizing plan to reach out to unions to bring these benefits that we've identified to help change the strategy, add strategies to the union movement to grow the labor movement and through worker cooperatives. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Liz. I see Johnny has his hand up, which is a wonderful way for me to recognize people who want to speak. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. My name is Johnny Sopchak. I'm so thankful to be a guest here from Vancouver, Canada. I'm a full-time organizer with IATSE and the Arts and Cultural Workers Union. And I just want to say, Rebecca, this toolkit you have produced is so helpful. So we have a couple worker co-ops, union worker co-ops in Vancouver. We launched a new initiative in the fall called the Union Cooperative Initiative with incredible support from Kristen and Co-op Cincy. And the toolkit that you've produced, Rebecca, was actually what brought on our statewide labor federation, the BC Federation of Labor, So they have become a founding member of the Union Cooperative Initiative. And actually next week, it kind of dovetails with the previous conversation. The first stage of that partnership is launching a training program for union workers and labor leaders on organizing and community organizing, and the cooperative model is going to be a big part of that. So we have 20 members coming next week, and that the toolkit has also brought on our second labor union partner, IATSE Local 891 in the film industry. And so we have two groups of workers going through the incorporation process now to launch cooperatives, worker co-ops in the film industry of sound editors and commercial video production. So I wanted to say, yeah, just how great that toolkit is. And then secondly, if any of you are working in on a statewide level and you need an example to pull from, we have two real champions at the provincial level in British Columbia now.
Great, Johnny. I'm so glad. I want to make sure you connect with Liz, and the listserv will serve as a way to let people know when there are committee meetings and whatnot. But we may, crowdsource some best ways to do some education and training and strategizing amongst unionists. Let me open it up. We've got about another 5 minutes before we close down the meeting, and I really want to make sure people who want to share can. I see Denise and Ray and Mary, all from our executive council, if you'd like to offer anything. I think I saw Min Sun as well, new members of our executive council. Please speak up if you want. We don't want to put people on the spot.
Well, two things if I can add. When I was hearing Mike's speaking, my mind went to our collective bargaining agreement that we have with 1199 SEIU. And when they created that CBA, there was a side letter there that indicated that CHCA was always to be recognized as a co-op and what that meant. So we didn't lose that in this transition of now becoming unionized. And we, so that was really clear. Like, this is our structure, this is how we operate, and we're not gonna move from there. So just in hearing Mike speak, it just brought me back to that, like years ago, to that side letter that we have in the CBA. And Rebecca, just when you were talking about the cooperative ecosystem, the globe, the heart, the right hand, the left hand, it just, I was like, yeah, this is all like trying to think of CHCA in 1199. And I thought of, and you gave two examples, but I thought of examples for the heart, for the right hand, See, when we're creating a labor management committee, 1199 funded money for us to be able to operate and design the labor management committee. So it was, a lot of good comes out from that partnership, and I think the 4 things really resonate so much with me, and hearing it and hearing the explanations and tying it back to CHCA and our practices here.
Can I just jump in with an anecdote about collective bargaining at your co-op? I was at a conference once with the SEIU representative who was telling me about his experience when he, at his first collecting bargaining with the co-op, with the home service co-op. And he said, we're going back and forth pretty traditionally. But then I said, wait a minute, I'm asking management to leave because the union people have to talk. And the guy's manager says, wait a minute, I'm in the co-op, I can't leave. And the guy said, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, that was the president that was here before, Michael. I had
to drag him out of the room. One of those complications that came up.
Yeah.
It was funny at the time. You've obviously solved it.
It really was, and it was really a new experience for us because that's not the way we operated here. And for them to tell us you need to leave the room because we need to talk to your workers, and I was like, but it was also a new relationship, a new dynamic, and something new for us to learn. And almost had a hard
for him to learn too, obviously.
Yes.
It is a repeated story, and I love when Denise is in the room with that story because she was in the room when it happened.
Oh yeah, I had to drag the president out of the room and say, because he was really red and really upset about it, and I said, yeah, we're not going to win this fight. Let's just go to the next room and see what happens.
One of the things the reason I developed these 4 memes, you know, the imagery, the heart, the hands, and the globe, is partly because I've seen a lot of people who do something very well and they want to start a business. Maybe it's making brownies, maybe it's repairing homes. They want to start a business. They do something very well. But what I identify is they do one of those 4 things very well. And the ability to scale to be successful, even making payday on Friday, is not being able to make the brownies very well. It's being able to do a lot of other things that have to do with sales, regulation, understanding the, all the different rules. We're seeing this in cannabis right now with regulations changing left and right. And we need to be in play. If a few people want to start a cannabis company, isn't that great? But if they aren't in play with the big boys, so to speak, government and policymakers in industry, we lose out. Same thing with really being able to run the finances. I want to really thank you, Josh, for sharing, an experience you have of looking under the hood in a business and realizing we have some of that acumen amongst us if we put it to work. Let me see, Ray, did you want to come on screen and say a word?
I don't even know what to add. I really appreciate people's comments. I love seeing the Workers United folks, Gary and Richard. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot about this, what a couple folks were just talking about in terms of trying to, destabilize our kind of traditional thoughts about adversarial labor relations and rank and file versus management and all of that. And yeah, it's taken me some time too to kind of like actually go through collective bargaining, like some folks mentioned, and feel what it actually feels like to be more sort of organically aligned as a whole enterprise or unit. And of course, it's not without conflict and without difficulty too. And so I'm also one of the people from one of the unions that has benefited a lot from the toolkit, partly because it kind of breaks out, I think, the guiding principles that, sometimes it's helpful to lift things up to a higher level and just really think about like what principles we want to be guided by. And I found that really useful.
Thanks. I think I'm going to invite us to close it down because we said we'd go till 2:15. I think the listserv might get pretty active right now. So if you want to be on a committee, you could chat in the listserv. We'll send out something over time that invites people. John said, we meet every other month in this general meeting with one exception. I forget what month it is. That's the exception. But you'll get notification. Maddie, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, I can take it from here. So it's every other month except December. We usually skip December because who can ever find time to meet in December? But yeah, for folks who are already on the listserv, you can pick these conversations up right now. For folks who are new, I'm going to be loading everybody's names up into the listserv this afternoon. So give me a couple hours. And yeah, the recording and the slides from this will be sent out both as a follow-up to the registration and also in the listserv. And there will also be some more info about how you can get involved in task forces. I think I've already got a couple emails from folks saying that they want to be directed to this task force or the other, which is awesome. And yeah, that is sort of all the wrap up we have right now, but this is just really amazing, that we've still got 41 people with us and it's 2:16. So it's just a real testament to the dedication and excitement around this work. So I really love this part of my work with the Federation and with all of you.
Great. I don't know if Maddie's going to close the room right away, but I'll stay on for a few minutes until she does. And then we can just, if anyone wants to check in. Thank you, everybody. Nice to see you, Deb.
I'll leave it open till like 2:20.